You can't afford a lawyer. My father-in-law, Arthur, laughed, his golden signet ring flashing in the fluorescent lights of the hallway outside the courtroom. You're an elementary school teacher, Sarah. You have no money, no leverage, and no family that matters. Sign the custody papers, hand over the trust fund, and walk away. My husband, David, wouldn't even look at me. He just stood behind his wealthy, controlling father, holding the divorce papers that would strip me of everything, including my 6-year-old daughter. Everyone in the hallway thought I was completely defeated. My palms were sweating, my heart was hammering, but I didn't cry. Instead, I quietly checked my watch. 9 a.m. Exactly on cue, the heavy double doors at the end of the corridor swung open. The click of polished leather shoes echoed through the hall. Arthur's confident smirk slowly vanished as his own high-priced legal team turned pale. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and for 6 years, I worked as an elementary school teacher while building what I thought was a humble, happy life. I married David because I genuinely loved him. He was gentle, attentive, and quiet. But beneath that gentle exterior was a man completely under the thumb of his father, Arthur, a ruthless real estate developer whose pride was as oversized as his bank account. To Arthur, I was always a disappointment. I was just the daughter of a small-town mechanic, a woman with a modest salary and no connections. When David and I had our daughter, Lily, Arthur tolerated me. But the moment his real estate empire ran into trouble, his attitude shifted from icy indifference to outright hostility. Out of nowhere, David served me with divorce papers. He didn't even have the courage to hand them to me himself. He sent a process server to my school. Arthur had convinced David that I was holding him back, and together, they devised a cruel, calculated plan to erase me from their lives. They filed for full custody of Lily, alleging that my teacher's salary couldn't provide a suitable lifestyle. Worse, they altered joint financial records to make it look like I had drained our savings. Sitting in that cold hallway outside the courtroom, Arthur leaned in, his voice dripping with venom. You're an elementary school teacher, Sarah, he sneered, laughing quietly. You have no money, no leverage, and no family that matters. You can't afford a lawyer to fight us. Sign the papers, hand over the custody, and walk away. David stood right behind him, staring at the floor like a coward. They thought I was completely trapped, backed into a corner with nowhere to run. What Arthur and David didn't realize was that their arrogance had completely blinded them. In the 3 weeks leading up to this court date, my life had been a nightmare. Arthur's high-priced legal team had bombarded me with aggressive phone calls, demand letters, and legal threats. Every document they sent was designed to terrify me into giving up Lily without a fight. They assumed that because I was a soft-spoken teacher from a quiet, working-class background, I would crumble under the pressure. Arthur was convinced my family was nobody. He knew my father was a retired small-town mechanic who spent his days fixing tractors, and he assumed that meant we were completely helpless, uneducated, and broke. But Arthur had made a fatal mistake. He had done zero research on the rest of my family. What he didn't know was that I had an older brother. Years ago, my brother left our small town on a full academic scholarship to Harvard Law School. He didn't just graduate at the top of his class. He went on to build a fierce, untouchable reputation in corporate litigation and high-stakes asset recovery. While I had chosen a quiet life in education because I loved teaching children, my brother had spent the last 15 years dismantling corrupt corporations and predatory billionaires. When the harassment from Arthur began, I didn't break down, and I didn't sign their trap of a settlement. Instead, I made a single phone call. For 2 weeks, while Arthur was busy celebrating what he thought was an easy victory, my brother was quietly digging into every single one of Arthur's financial records, tax filings, and corporate holdings. Arthur thought he was playing chess against a helpless amateur, completely unaware that he was walking straight into a trap. So, when the heavy courtroom doors swung open at exactly 9 a.m., Arthur didn't even bother to turn around at first. He was too busy smiling at his lead attorney, confident that the judge would grant them a default judgment the moment I walked in without representation. Then came the heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing across the marble floor. I looked up, and standing there in a tailored charcoal suit was my older brother, Julian. He carried a sleek leather briefcase in one hand and an undeniable aura of absolute authority. Beside him were two junior associates, each carrying thick, navy blue binders crammed with documents. Arthur's lead attorney took one look at Julian, and the color instantly drained from his face. He recognized him immediately. Julian wasn't just any lawyer. He was a senior partner at one of the most formidable litigation firms in the entire country, notorious for completely destroying dishonest corporations. "Who on earth is that?" Arthur whispered angrily, his smug smile faltering as he noticed his attorney's trembling hands. Julian didn't even look at Arthur or David. He walked straight up to me, pulled me into a warm embrace, and said softly, "Sorry I'm late, sis. Traffic was terrible." Then, Julian turned around. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by an expression as cold as ice. He stepped up to Arthur's legal team and set a massive, sealed folder directly onto their table, with a sharp thud. "My name is Julian Vance," my brother said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hallway. "I am representing my sister, Sarah. And before we step foot into that courtroom, you might want to review these filings regarding your client's illegal offshore transfers and fraudulent marital asset concealment." The silence in the hallway was deafening. Arthur's attorney opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the first page before looking up at Arthur with absolute panic in his eyes. Without a word, he signaled for Arthur and David to follow him into a private consultation room, but Julian simply checked his watch, turned on his heel, and walked straight into the courtroom. I followed right beside him, holding my head high for the first time in months. When the judge called our case, Arthur's confident swagger was entirely gone. He and David sat at their table looking shell-shocked, while their lead attorney looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. When it was our turn to speak, Julian stood up with complete composure. In a calm, methodical voice, he dismantled Arthur's entire case in less than 10 minutes. He didn't just present evidence of my stable, loving home life and spotless track record as a mother and, "You can't afford a lawyer." My father-in-law, Arthur, laughed, his golden signet ring flashing in the fluorescent lights of the hallway outside the courtroom. "You're an elementary school teacher, Sarah. You have no money, no leverage, and no family that matters. Sign the custody papers, hand over the trust fund, and walk away." My husband, David, wouldn't even look at me. He just stood behind his wealthy, controlling father, holding the divorce papers that would strip me of everything, including my 6-year-old daughter. Everyone in the hallway thought I was completely defeated. My palms were sweating, my heart was hammering, but I didn't cry. Instead, I quietly checked my watch. 9 a.m., exactly on cue, the heavy double doors at the end of the corridor swung open. The click of polished leather shoes echoed through the hall. Arthur's confident smirk slowly vanished as his own high-priced legal team turned pale.
"Teacher."
He dropped a bombshell on the court, concrete proof that Arthur and David had systematically falsified financial affidavits to make me look destitute, while illegally hiding over $1.5 million in joint marital assets in hidden accounts. The judge's face darkened as she reviewed the forensic accounting reports Julian handed over. She slammed her gavel down so hard it echoed off the mahogany walls. She immediately dismissed their petition for full custody, awarded me primary physical custody of Lily, and ordered an emergency audit of all of Arthur and David's business accounts. She explicitly warned Arthur that if the forensic details held up under full investigation, he and his son would be facing severe criminal charges for perjury and fraud. Walking out of that courthouse, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Arthur avoided my gaze completely as he rushed out the side doors, surrounded by his panicked attorneys, while David stood frozen in the hallway, realizing too late that his father's arrogance had destroyed everything. With Julian by my side, I secured full custody of Lily, our home, and a fair financial settlement that guaranteed our future. I went right back to the classroom I love, but with a newfound strength, knowing that no amount of money or intimidation could ever take my family away from me again. What would you have done if you found yourself facing a family like Arthur's? Have you ever had to stand up to someone who thought their power made them invincible? Drop your thoughts and the city you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to see how far my story has reached.